Hello friends, Paper Historian here. I'm glad to welcome you to my channel, where we don't just tell stories, we drag you into them, with all the sweat, wine and questionable decisions left intact. In today's video, we'll step into the sandals of a Roman aristocrat, back when the empire called itself eternal and believed it, when marble and blood were equally common building materials, and when wealth meant more slaves, more banquets, and more headaches than you could count. Get comfortable, because tonight we're not talking about emperors and their glory. We're talking about the daily grind of the men who claim to rule the world while being ruled themselves. By vanity, by money, by the endless roar of the mob. So, lean back, let the city's noise fade to a hum, and let me walk you through the contradictions of Rome's golden age. You wake not because you want to, but because a slave shakes you awake at an hour no civilized man should be expected to see, and you grunt, roll over, and remember that you are not a barbarian farmer bound to the soil, but a Roman of status, which means that even your laziness must be managed by others. The atrium is already lit, oil lamps hissing, another slave whispering the day's schedule into your ear, though you only catch fragments. Clients, forum, baths, dinner with Marcus, some nonsense about the emperor's latest decree. You groan, not because the tasks are hard, but because they are tedious, and the great irony of power is that it comes wrapped in obligations you never asked for but cannot refuse. You pull yourself up, not entirely by choice, because another slave is already tugging your tunic over your head, while a boy with steady hands scrapes your chin with a razor sharper than his own future. A basin of cold water waits, splashed perfunctorily onto your face, not to cleanse so much as to shock you into appearing alive. And then the sandals, tied neatly, the cloak draped just so. You would rather stay in bed, let the city rot without your contribution. But Rome has rules for men like you. If you do not show your face, people will invent a reason why, and the reason will never flatter you. The clients are already waiting in the vestibulum when you appear, a row of anxious men, poorer than you but desperate for your smile, your patronage, your crumbs of influence. They bow, they fawn, they flatter, calling you Dominus in tones that sound reverent but taste like need. You distribute greetings like coins, one for each man, though you know most will walk away disappointed because there is never enough favor to go around. One asks for help with a court case, another begs for a job for his cousin, another simply wants to be seen at your side so his neighbors think he matters. You nod, you smile, you promise to consider, and you forget each one as soon as he leaves. Patronage is theatre, not charity. After the salutatio, the parade of clients dismissed with handshakes and vague assurances, you sit briefly to break your fast. Don't imagine luxury here. Breakfast is not a feast, just bread, cheese, figs, maybe a few olives if the kitchen remembered. Real eating is for later, for evening, for spectacle. Morning food is fuel, not pleasure, and besides, you must be seen as disciplined. Overindulgence in the morning is for provincials and gluttons. You are neither, at least not officially. Then comes the forum. Always the forum. The beating heart of Rome, though by now you suspect it is more like its diseased liver, swollen with ambition, corruption, and gossip. You make your way through streets already clogged with vendors, beggars, carts, and the constant roar of humanity. Slaves clear your path, but not too aggressively. No need to appear tyrannical before you've even had your morning bribe. You arrive to the marble steps and colonnades, the great basilicas echoing with voices, the temples gleaming in the sun, all of it designed to remind you that Rome is eternal, though you privately suspect eternity smells less like incense and more like sweat, piss, and politics. Business begins. Not yours, of course. You have men for that. But your presence is currency, and you spend it generously because you must. You listen to petitions, you nod at magistrates, you murmur agreements with senators who never remember your name but always remember your vote. A scribe whispers updates, grain shipments delayed, a tax revolt in the provinces, another trial for corruption. You feign interest, knowing full well that Rome runs not on justice or efficiency, but on favours and fear. And as long as you maintain the right balance of both, your own affairs will remain secure. The court cases drag on, endless speeches by advocates who mistake noise for eloquence, jurors who are bribed before the trial even begins, verdicts written long before evidence is heard. You sit through one out of duty, watching as a wealthy merchant accuses a rival of theft, the crowd yawning as lawyers declaim in endless circles. Everyone knows the outcome. The richer man will win. Justice in Rome is not blind. It simply looks the other way when paid to do so. By midday, the heat grows oppressive, the stone radiating the sun back into your face, the crowd restless, the smells overwhelming. You retreat, like all sensible men, to the baths, because business is exhausting and hygiene, though rarely achieved, must at least be attempted. On the way, more clients intercept you, more friends remind you of obligations, more slaves press messages into your hand. You nod, you smile, you curse internally. Rome never lets you breathe. At the baths, you strip away the dust and the pretense, and for a moment, you feel human again. Slaves scrape oil from your skin, the hot room bakes your bones, the cold plunge shocks you awake, and you chat idly with other men of your rank. Politics, gossip, rumours, half lies and half truths, indistinguishable by design. Who has fallen from favour, who has been caught with whose wife, which general in the provinces is skimming too much from the treasury. You contribute your share, careful never to reveal more than you should. Information is Rome's second currency, after silver. When you leave, refreshed and irritated in equal measure, the day is not done. There are more meetings, more obligations, more demands disguised as friendship. You walk through the streets, past the tenements where the poor rot in filth, past the markets where slaves are bought and sold like livestock, past temples where priests mutter prayers in exchange for coins. You do not linger. Rome is a theatre, and your role is not to gaze at the suffering, but to glide above it, smiling, nodding, pretending that the empire is held together by law and virtue rather than blood and bribes. By evening you will feast, but for now you endure. Because that is what Roman aristocracy truly is. Not freedom, not luxury, not even power, but endurance of endless rituals that convince everyone else, and sometimes even yourself, that you matter more than the mud you walk on. And so the day continues, as it always does, an endless performance in marble and dust. By the time the sun climbs to its brutal peak, you are already knee-deep in the swamp that Romans insist on calling the Forum Romanum, a place where ideals are carved in marble, but daily business is carved in flesh. The heat bounces from stone to stone, the air is thick with incense, sweat, and animal dung. And yet here you stand, pretending that every tedious minute is an honour rather than a punishment. Your toga is heavy, hot, and arranged with the precision of a military formation. Heaven forbid a fold falls the wrong way, because nothing says unfit for office faster than a badly draped toga. You drift from one basilica to another, and everywhere there are men talking, shouting, scheming. Advocates with voices sharp enough to cut marble argue endlessly about property disputes that were decided weeks ago by coin under the table. Senators stroll, pretending their decisions are guided by wisdom, while their slaves carry wax tablets swollen with bribes. Magistrates stride about in red-bordered togas, giving the impression of command while their secretaries do the actual thinking. The crowd swirls and shifts, beggars tugging at hems, clients clustering around patrons like bees around honey, all of it noisy, smelly, alive, and fundamentally absurd. A man catches your arm. Gaius, a provincial official from Hispania, who once bribed you with olive oil thick enough to use as plaster. He greets you as if you were his long-lost brother, though you both know you are only long-lost creditors. He babbles about a shipment delayed, taxes miscounted, roads crumbling, and you nod, murmur, promise to speak with someone. while silently calculating how much coin you can squeeze out of his desperation. This is the rhythm of the forum. No one comes to solve problems, only to exchange them for different ones. Next, a hearing, not because you care, but because absence will be noticed. You join the crowd in the Basilica Julia, where a merchant is accusing his rival of fraud. The lawyers launch into orations so florid, you half expect flowers to tumble from their mouths. The audience groans, because everyone knows the verdict is already bought and paid for. The only suspense is whether the judge will pretend to deliberate. You watch the lawyers gesture dramatically, thumping their chests, waving scrolls, quoting Cicero as if quoting gods, and you realize they are not arguing law but auditioning for patronage, hoping someone like you will notice their performance and hire them. Rome is not about justice, it is about careers. Between speeches, you wander back into the forum proper, greeted by more clients who insist on rehearsing their misery. One man begs for your influence in securing a post for his son. Another, poorer, clutches at your arm and whispers about a dispute over a field. You smile, nod, promise, forget. Patronage is theatre, not memory. Still, you toss a coin or two because generosity must be visible, even if it is hollow. Then come the senators. You are not one of the great names, not a Caesar or a Scipio, but you are wealthy enough to be courted and dangerous enough to be flattered. They gather in little knots under the porticos, whispering about the emperor's latest decree, debating whether to obey or merely pretend to obey. Some insist the emperor is divine, others whisper that he is mad, but all agree that their loyalty will be determined by who offers the larger estate. You join the circle, nod at the right moments, mutter phrases like stability and prosperity, words so empty they can mean anything, which is precisely why they are useful. And always, business. Deals struck in whispers, sealed with handshakes, confirmed with coins. Grain shipments diverted from one province to another, contracts for building temples awarded to cousins, tax exemptions granted to friends. Money flows through the forum like blood, and you are both a vein and a parasite, feeding and being fed upon. You despise it, but you cannot leave it. Rome has built a machine where every man of standing must turn the wheel or be crushed beneath it. At midday, when the heat becomes unbearable and even the marble sweats, you withdraw to a shaded portico to pretend you are contemplating philosophy while actually counting favors. A Greek tutor recites a fragment of Plato for your amusement, though his words are drowned out by the bellowing of a senator caught in an argument about aqueducts. You sip watered wine, nibble olives, and consider the absurdity of it all. A city that calls itself eternal, yet cannot pave a road without 3 bribes and a riot. You catch fragments of gossip, a general in the east growing too ambitious, a governor in Africa pocketing more grain than he sends, a wealthy widow rumoured to be looking for a new husband. Each rumour is a thread, and if you pull the right one, you might weave it into gold, but you are careful. Rome devours men who pull too hard. The afternoon closes with a perfunctory sacrifice at the temple, because appearances must be maintained. A priest slaughters a goat, mutters words even he doesn't believe, and smears blood on the altar while the crowd pretends to be moved. You clap politely, because faith is less important than being seen to have faith. By the time the shadows lengthen, you are exhausted, not from work, because you've done little, but from the endless parade of faces, voices, obligations, all clamoring for your attention. You head toward the baths, knowing that only steam, oil, and idle chatter can wash away the stench of politics. Entertainment in Rome is not leisure. It is duty disguised as pleasure, a public performance in which your presence, your posture, your applause all matter more than whether you actually enjoy yourself. You cannot simply stay home, drink quietly, and let the world forget you. Absence is interpreted as weakness, indifference, or worse, dissent. So you go, because the city demands it, because status is maintained as much in the stands of the Colosseum as it is in the halls of the Senate. The games begin early, though you arrive late. Never too early, never too eager. That would look provincial. Your litter carries you through the packed streets toward the Colosseum, past vendors selling honey cakes, sausages, cheap wine in clay cups, and charms that promise good fortune in wagers you are about to lose. The crowd presses thick, shouting, pushing, buzzing with the kind of energy only blood and spectacle can create. Everyone comes, patricians in fine togas, plebeians in patched tunics, slaves carrying baskets, foreigners gaping at the scale of it all. Rome gathers to watch men die, and you would be foolish to miss it. Inside, the amphitheatre is a marvel and a nightmare. Stone arches soar above you, awnings stretch against the sun, sailors tug ropes to adjust the great canvas as if steering a ship of shadows. The arena below is sand, but not clean sand. Sand soaked in history, in sweat, in screams, in blood that never truly washes away. You take your seat in the tier reserved for men of your station, shaded, cushioned, close enough to see the fight, but not close enough to smell the rot. Senators, priests, magistrates sit around you, each pretending their opinions matter to the outcome, though everyone knows the only voice that counts belongs to the emperor. The morning events are executions. Criminals, deserters, unlucky slaves thrown to beasts or made to reenact myths with endings everyone already knows. Prometheus chained, his liver pecked out by an eagle that doesn't care about symbolism. Orpheus torn apart by wild animals, though this Orpheus cannot play the lyre and screams off key. The crowd roars approval, as if justice is being served rather than theatre rehearsed. You clap politely, sip watered wine, and pretend to find meaning in it, though privately you note that Rome is less a civilization than a very expensive butcher shop. Then the venations, the beast hunts, exotic animals dragged from Africa, Asia, wherever the empire's reach extends. Lions prodded with spears until they roar, elephants forced into mock battles against terrified hunters, ostriches chased for comedy. The crowd cheers louder for the animals than for the men, because novelty is more entertaining than desperation. You sigh because you have seen it all before. Rome has conquered the world, and now it kills it for fun. Finally, the gladiators. The real show. Trumpets blare, gates creak, and out they march. Men armoured, scarred, trained to kill and to die with grace. The crowd surges to its feet, chanting names like demigods, Spiculus, Carpophorus, names etched into graffiti on walls, whispered in taverns, adored by children. They are slaves, criminals, volunteers. But here they are celebrities, worth more dead than you will ever be alive. You watch as they fight, swords clashing, shields splintering, blood spraying in arcs too perfect to be accidental. The crowd gasps, roars, chants, and when a man falls, all eyes turn to the emperor, waiting for the thumb that decides life or death. You know the gesture is ambiguous, historians will argue about it for centuries, but the crowd doesn't care. Mercy or slaughter, it is spectacle, and spectacle is Rome's true religion. After hours of blood, sweat and sand, you leave the amphitheatre, head pounding, ears ringing, heart oddly empty. You pretend to be exhilarated when you meet friends outside, because to admit boredom is dangerous. Better to smile, to nod, to remark on a clever kill, to place a wager for the next games. Everyone pretends the carnage means something. No one admits it means nothing. From there, the baths. Always the baths. Not because you need cleaning, no amount of scraping oil can wash Rome off you, but because the baths are where men of standing display their leisure, their bodies, their gossip. You strip, hand your clothes to a slave who could sell them for more than he earns in a year, and step into the rhythm of heat, steam, cold. Tepidarium, caldarium, frigidarium, each stage as familiar as breathing, each chamber echoing with voices. Men discuss politics while sweating, debate philosophy while naked, conduct business while soaking. You join them, because deals made in steam often last longer than those made in marble. Here, the conversations are looser, freer, lubricated by sweat and wine. A senator whispers about a scandal involving a Vestal virgin. A merchant boasts of profits from Egyptian grain. A general hints at unrest among the legions in the provinces. You listen, you nod, you file it away. The baths are as much a marketplace of information as the forum, and the currency is gossip. And then, the other kind of entertainment. The intimate, the personal, the scandalous. Lovers arranged, mistresses maintained, assignations made in whispered promises under porticos. Adultery is not frowned upon so much as mishandled adultery. A man may share his bed with whomever he pleases, as long as it does not embarrass him. A woman may endure her husband's wandering, as long as it is discreet. Scandal destroys not by sin, but by incompetence. You have your share of entanglements, slaves, courtesans, the occasional bored matron, and each one is a risk disguised as pleasure. The poets romanticize it, but you know better. Love in Rome is not passion, it is strategy with perfume. By the time evening approaches, you are drained not from pleasure, but from performance. Every smile, every clap, every word has been weighed, calculated, displayed. Rome demands your presence in every arena, political, social, physical, and you cannot refuse. You live not for yourself, but for the audience, for the endless crowd that watches, judges, whispers. Entertainment in Rome is not about joy, it is about survival, gilded with laughter and drowned in wine. Evening in Rome is not an end, but a crescendo, the point at which the city, already ridiculous by day, finally strips off any remaining pretense of restraint and plunges into spectacle with the seriousness of men who confuse indulgence for destiny. You do not rest when the sun goes down. You perform, you drink, you eat until groaning, you argue until hoarse, and you laugh until even you begin to wonder whether Rome is drunk on wine or on itself. You receive an invitation, not that you could decline it, engraved on ivory and delivered by a slave who looks as exhausted by the weight of other men's obligations as you are. Dinner at Marcus's villa, a man who prides himself on two things, his wealth and the fact that everyone else knows it. You prepare not with anticipation but with resignation, because to miss such a gathering would mark you as unfashionable, and in Rome, unfashionable is more dangerous than treason. The villa gleams when you arrive, torches flickering along marble colonnades, fountains spraying water dyed with saffron, musicians plucking lyres with more enthusiasm than skill. Slaves greet you at the entrance, offering garlands, perfumes, and a taste of wine so sweet it could double as syrup. You accept, not because you want it, but because refusing would insult a man whose ego is as fragile as his digestion. The dining room, the triclinium, is a theatre in itself. Couches arranged in a U-shape, each occupied by men of wealth, status, ambition. Women are present, but not wives. Rome prefers mistresses and courtesans at dinner. Wives belong at home, weaving or pretending fidelity. You recline, propped on one elbow, sandals kicked off, tunic loosened, because to sit upright would suggest you are poor enough to still have dignity. Then the food begins. Course after course, each more excessive than the last. Dormice stuffed with minced pork and pine nuts, oysters from distant shores, peacocks roasted whole, their feathers reattached for display. Platters of honey cakes, sausages, figs, mullets dyed red to impress with colour rather than taste. The rich eat not to be nourished, but to be seen eating, to prove that their wealth can summon creatures from the corners of the earth just to die in their kitchens. You chew mechanically, swallow politely, but your stomach already aches from the absurdity of it all. Slaves circulate with bowls to collect vomit, because moderation is less Roman than conquest. Wine flows like a second river through the city, strong, heavy, cut with water only enough to keep it from burning holes in the cups. Cups refilled before you can finish them, toasts demanded every few minutes, each more insincere than the last. To the emperor, to the gods, to Rome eternal, to Marcus's hospitality, to anything that allows men to keep drinking. You sip, you smile, you mutter approval, though your head begins to spin and your tongue thickens with words you'd rather not say. And then the conversation begins, because eating is only the prelude, talking is the real performance. Philosophers brought in like trained animals spout stoic aphorisms while guests nod gravely, pretending to understand. A cynic sneers at the wealth of the table while eating from it, and everyone chuckles at his audacity. Poets recite verses dripping with allusions no one catches, but everyone applauds because to admit confusion is to admit inferiority. A historian reads a passage about Rome's destiny, and the table erupts in cheers as if destiny were edible. You play your part, of course. You praise the verses, laugh at the jokes, ask the philosophers questions that make you sound learned without obligating you to listen to their answers. You quote a line of Homer, slightly misremembered, and no one corrects you because correction is ruder than ignorance. The night flows on in this endless charade, words piling on words, meaning evaporating, only the performance remaining. Entertainment is not limited to speech. Dancers whirl through the room, their bodies painted, their movements exaggerated, brought in from the provinces to remind Rome of its reach. Musicians strike up louder tunes, flutes and drums, the sound clashing against the roar of laughter and the crash of plates. Jugglers perform, acrobats tumble, a trained monkey dressed as a senator waddles across the floor to thunderous applause. Rome laughs at itself, not realizing the joke is sharper than it seems, and always, beneath the spectacle, the politics. Men lean close, whisper deals, trade promises in between toasts, marriages arranged, contracts signed, favors promised. Someone mutters about a grain shortage. Another promises to speak with the prefect. A governor seeks funding, a senator seeks silence, a merchant seeks immunity. The triclinium is less a dining room than a marketplace of corruption, and the currency is flattery. As the night deepens, the tone shifts. Wine loosens tongues, laughter grows louder, hands wander more freely. Scandals are born in moments like these, men too drunk to hide their lovers, women too bold to pretend disinterest. Adultery blossoms, gossip multiplies, and tomorrow the forum will hum with stories of who touched whom under the table, but no one cares now. Tonight is indulgence, tomorrow is someone else's problem. By the time the final course arrives, sweetmeats soaked in honey, fruits imported at impossible cost, you are bloated, drunk, exhausted. Marcus beams, proud of his excess, certain that his dinner will be remembered as a triumph. You smile, nod, thank him profusely, though you silently pray never to endure such triumph again. You leave the villa unsteadily, carried more by slaves than by your own feet, the streets dark, the city still alive with shouts, songs, arguments. Rome never sleeps. It merely changes costumes. You stumble into your own domus, collapse onto a couch, and wonder, not for the first time, whether Rome is great because of these nights, or doomed because of them. Then you sleep, too tired to care. Wealth in Rome is not a question of talent or genius or even luck. It is a question of inheritance, exploitation, and the art of squeezing coin from the blood of others, while smiling as if you had invented prosperity itself. You are not rich because you work. You are rich because generations before you did the right marriages, backed the right wars, bribed the right officials, and left you with estates sprawling across Italy and beyond. You tell yourself it is destiny, noble lineage, divine favor. But you know in your quieter moments that it is theft, politely aged into tradition. Your money begins with land, always land, broad estates outside the city, where wheat grows in endless fields under the punishing sun, harvested by men who do not share your name, your rights, or your freedom. Slaves bought in bulk from wars, branded, chained, driven into the soil until they either break or die. You do not see them often. Overseers handle that. Men with whips and iron discipline, who ensure that grain reaches the granaries, that profits reach your purse. Sometimes you visit, riding in like a conqueror, inspecting rows of bowed backs, nodding approval at yields you did not sow, did not reap, did not sweat for. You call it agriculture, they call it survival. But land alone does not satisfy Rome's appetite. You invest in trade. Grain from Africa, wine from Gaul, olive oil from Hispania, silk smuggled in from Parthia, spices dragged across half the world. Ships creak into Ostia loaded with goods, and your agents tally, count, argue, cheat. You rarely set foot on a dock yourself. The sea is for sailors and gods, not men of your dignity. But you profit from every storm weathered, every sailor drowned. Rome depends on trade, and trade depends on exploitation, and exploitation depends on men like you pretending it is enterprise. Then there are the taxes. Provinces conquered not for glory, but for revenue. Governors installed with wide smiles and wider appetites, squeezing coin from peasants who already live on the edge of starvation. You take your share, of course. Every Roman elite does. Contracts for tax farming are auctioned like theatre tickets. The highest bidder earns the right to extort, and the provinces groan under the weight of their civilizing overlords. You hear stories of villages emptied, of temples stripped bare, of people sold into slavery because they could not pay. You shake your head, mutter something about harsh necessities, and count your profits. Justice does not pay as well as plunder. Corruption is not a vice in Rome. It is a lubricant, the oil that keeps the vast, groaning machinery of empire turning. No contract is signed without a bribe, no court case decided without a purse exchanged, no law passed without someone's hand greased. You do not resist it, you participate. You send gifts to magistrates, arrange dowries for judges' daughters, promise votes in exchange for exemptions. Everyone plays, and the only sin is losing. Morality is for philosophers, coin is for survival. And always slaves, slaves in your kitchens, slaves in your fields, slaves in your minds, slaves warming your bed if you wish it. Rome runs on slavery as much as it runs on aqueducts and legions. You tell yourself they are fortunate, that life in Rome, even in chains, is better than life in barbarian forests. You do not believe it, but you say it, because silence would sound too much like guilt. You watch them move silently through your home, carrying trays, pouring wine, their eyes downcast, their hands trembling when they spill. You pretend not to notice, because noticing would require you to feel. Provincial exploitation is the empire's hidden feast. Africa's grain feeds the mob, Hispania's mines flood the treasury with silver, Gaul bleeds taxes, Asia furnishes luxuries. You, sitting in Rome, sipping imported wine, taste the suffering of 100 nations without ever leaving your atrium. The empire is a beast, and you are its stomach. It consumes endlessly, digests slowly, excretes nothing but monuments and arrogance. Yet wealth is not secure. Fortunes vanish as quickly as they appear. Fires devour estates, pirates seize ships, emperors confiscate land. So you diversify. You lend money at obscene interest to desperate men. You gamble on gladiator schools. You buy influence in the Senate like one buys olives at the market. You do not work, not really, but you labor endlessly to maintain the illusion that your wealth is eternal, ordained, untouchable. And what do you do with this wealth? You spend it ostentatiously, wastefully, as if to prove to the gods that you are their equal. Villas in the countryside, marble and mosaics imported from Greece, fountains that spit water perfumed with roses. Cloaks dyed in Tyrian purple so expensive they could feed 10 families for a year. Banquets that waste more food in a night than a poor man will see in a lifetime. You host games, you fund temples, you sponsor poets. not from generosity, but from vanity. In Rome, public display is private insurance. But beneath the marble, you feel the cracks. You see the plebeians restless, the mob demanding bread and circuses, the provinces seething under taxation, the slaves whispering rebellion. You hear rumors of uprisings, of generals too ambitious, of emperors too fragile. You tell yourself Rome is eternal, unshakable, destined to rule until the end of time. You laugh at the idea of decline. But sometimes, late at night, when the torches burn low and the city falls into uneasy silence, you wonder if eternity should feel this fragile. Because deep down, you know, Rome's greatness is not built on marble, but on debt. Debt of blood, debt of labor, debt of suffering. And debts, no matter how long delayed, are always paid. You sit at the end of another long day, toga tossed aside, sandals unlaced, wine cup heavy in your hand, and for a fleeting moment you allow yourself the luxury Rome rarely grants. Silence. The city groans outside your walls, carts rumbling, drunks singing, dogs barking, the faint cries of a woman in labour drifting through the insulae, and yet within your atrium, with its painted walls and trickling fountain, you are cocooned, insulated by privilege. Still, the silence is fragile, and you know it cannot last, because Rome never allows silence. It must be filled with sound, with spectacle, with endless proof of its own importance. You think of your day, the forum, the baths, the games, the dinner, the endless parade of faces, favours, obligations. A life of marble and gold, but also of exhaustion. You remind yourself that you are fortunate, that you were born into a family that mattered, that you do not toil in fields or grovel in streets, that you do not wait in line for grain doles like so many others. But even as you list your blessings, they feel like chains. You are never free, not in the way the philosophers preach, because every smile must be calculated, every gesture measured, every absence explained. You are not a man, you are a performance. The empire, they say, is eternal. You have repeated those words at temples, toasted them at banquets, used them to end arguments when reason failed. Eternal Rome. But you know eternity is not what you have seen. You have seen fires sweep through neighborhoods, mobs riot for bread, legions mutiny when denied pay, senators whisper treason in the shadows of basilicas. You have seen emperors rise like gods and fall like beggars. Eternity, you suspect, is simply the refusal to admit that even empires age. You think of the provinces, of lands you own but have never walked, of men who sweat and die so you may sip wine beneath frescoed ceilings. You picture their faces, Gauls forced to dig silver from mines, Africans bending under sacks of grain, Greeks tutoring Roman children in words their own ancestors perfected. You do not dwell on them often. Rome teaches you not to. But sometimes, when the city grows quiet, you feel the weight of their lives pressing against your own. You tell yourself it is the natural order, that civilization must rest on someone's back. Yet you cannot shake the thought that the back may one day rise, shrugging off the weight, leaving you crushed beneath the fall. Your wealth surrounds you, mosaics glittering on floors, marble statues gazing with blank serenity, shelves of scrolls you pretend to have read. It should comfort you, prove your permanence. Instead, it feels fragile, absurd. You know how quickly fortunes vanish, fires, confiscations, a single emperor's whim. You know marble cracks, gold melts, scrolls burn. You know you will die, and when you do, your name may live on carved in stone, but it will mean nothing to the mouth still hungry, to the hands still chained, to the soldiers still bleeding for Rome's endless ambitions. And yet, you play your part. You always have, you always will. Because that is what Rome demands. Obedience dressed as dignity, exploitation disguised as prosperity, decay painted as eternity. You toast to the gods, though you doubt them. You fund games, though you despise them. You sit in the Senate, though you know it decides nothing. You host dinners, though you long for silence. You wear the mask, because the mask is safer than the truth. Sometimes you imagine another life. One where you are a farmer in Latium, rising with the sun, working the soil with your own hands, eating what you grow, answering to no one but the weather. Harder, yes, poorer, certainly, but freer perhaps. Yet the thought dies quickly, smothered by habit. You would not survive such a life, not really. Rome has spoiled you, caged you in luxury, taught you that survival is measured in status, not sweat. You envy the poor their obscurity even as you pity it. The philosophers speak of virtue, of living in accordance with nature, of freedom found in simplicity. You nod when they lecture, pretend to admire their courage, but you know Rome is not built for simplicity. Rome is built for excess, for spectacle, for hunger without end. And you are part of it, a cog in its great grinding machine, both victim and beneficiary. To wish otherwise is to wish Rome undone, and you cannot imagine a world without Rome, though you suspect one day such a world will exist. You sip your wine, the flavour dulled by repetition, and you wonder what will remain. Not the games, they fade with the roar of the crowd. Not the laws, they change with every ruler. Not even the temples, they crumble when the treasury runs dry. Perhaps only the stories will survive, carved in stone, scratched on scrolls, whispered in taverns. And in those stories, you will be a name, a shadow, a footnote, a reminder that men like you once thought themselves eternal. The fountain trickles, the torches burn low. You recline on your couch, eyes heavy, head thick with wine and weariness, and you tell yourself, one last time, that Rome is eternal, that you are eternal. You do not believe it, not entirely, but belief is not required. Performance is. And so you close your eyes and the city groans on, endless, insatiable, eternal, at least until it isn't. You wake not to the sound of birds or the warmth of gentle sunlight, but to the groaning of wooden beams above your head, to the cough of a neighbour through a wall so thin it may as well be parchment, to the squeal of a rat making a claim on the last crumbs of yesterday's bread. This is your home, if the word home can stretch far enough to cover a space where the roof leaks, the walls lean, and the stairs collapse if more than two men use them at once. It is an insula, one of Rome's towering apartment blocks, built fast, rented dear, and maintained never. They cram you and 100 others into it, stack you on top of each other like amphorae in a warehouse, and hope that the entire structure does not burn or crumble before the rent is due. Your room is one bare chamber, walls blackened by smoke from the oil lamp you cannot afford to light often, floor littered with mats that pass for beds. There is no kitchen. Why bother when fire inside would only guarantee your death? So meals are bought in the streets, ladled from pots simmering under awnings, food as public as everything else in your life. Privacy is a luxury for senators and poets. You live nose to nose with your neighbours, sharing not just smells and sounds, but fates. You are poor. There is no point dressing it up. The city calls you plebeian, which sounds like dignity, but it means nothing more than not important. You work when there is work, you beg when there is not, and either way you spend your days pressed into the same crowd, jostled by elbows, ignored by those with togas worth more than your life. Morning begins in the streets, because all of Rome begins in the streets. Vendors cry their wares: bread, olives, cheap wine cut with water, figs bruised from transport. Barbers offer shaves in the open air, their razors scraping faces while gossip flows thicker than soap. Bakers pull black loaves from communal ovens, the smell a rare kindness, though the price stings. You hand over your few coins for a loaf so hard it could double as a weapon, and you chew it anyway because hunger is sharper than your teeth. Work is never certain. Some days you labour at the docks, unloading grain shipments from Africa, your back bending, your hands blistering, while overseers shout as though their voices alone keep the empire fed. Other days, you haul stones for new buildings, sweating under loads that architects dream up and emperors demand. If fortune smiles, you might be hired to sweep streets, clean sewers, or carry water in jars so heavy they warp your spine. Most days, fortune does not smile. Most days you drift, looking for a task, a patron, a coin to keep you afloat until tomorrow. Entertainment is not absent, it is simply not yours. You are promised bread and circuses, but the bread is meager and the circuses are excuses to remind you of your place. The amphitheatre opens its gates and you shuffle in with the mob, filling the cheap seats high in the stands, squinting down at men killing each other for the city's amusement. You cheer because everyone cheers. You jeer because silence is suspicious. You watch blood-stained sand that you will never touch. And you leave with the same hunger you carried in. Rome calls this generosity. You call it distraction. Still, you find ways to live. A jug of cheap wine shared with neighbours, laughter echoing in alleys, songs half forgotten but sung anyway. Children chasing dogs through the filth, mothers scolding them with one eye on the pot boiling in the communal courtyard. Old men leaning against walls, telling stories that make poverty sound like tradition. You do not have much, but you have each other, and sometimes that is enough to convince you the city does not despise you entirely. Money is earned in drops and spent in floods. You barter more than you buy, trading labour for scraps, favours for favours. A neighbour lends you a cup of oil, you carry his bundle to the bathhouse. A baker slips you a burnt loaf, you sweep his stall when the day ends. Coin is scarce, but obligation is endless. Rome teaches you that survival is not about wealth, but about debt, about who owes what, about how long you can balance on the edge before falling into beggary. Religion hovers at the edges of your life. You make offerings when you can, toss a coin into a fountain, leave bread at a shrine. The gods of Rome are everywhere, peering from niches in walls, glaring from statues, muttering from the mouths of priests. You do not doubt them, you cannot afford to. The gods favour the rich, perhaps, but even a poor man clings to the hope that Jupiter might glance his way, that Fortuna might tilt the dice in his favour, that Mars might make a soldier of his son instead of a corpse. And through it all, the city looms. Rome, vast, hungry, choking with smoke, echoing with voices. Temples gleam, aqueducts stride across the hills, marble forums glitter, but you see the cracks, the filth, the rats. You see the divide between the senators in their ivory homes and the thousands crammed into tenements that reek of urine and despair. You know your place in this machine, to labour, to cheer, to die unnoticed. You resent it, but you also accept it, because resentment without power is just another weight to carry. At night, you return to your insula, climb creaking stairs that may or may not hold your weight, slip into your chamber, and lie on your mat listening to the chorus of Rome. Babies wailing, men arguing, lovers whispering, dogs snarling, drunks stumbling. You close your eyes and hope the building does not catch fire, because if it does, you will not wake. You sleep, not peacefully, but heavily, pulled down by exhaustion rather than comfort. Tomorrow, it will begin again. Entertainment, if you're poor in Rome, is not a luxury. It is anesthesia. You cannot afford statues, villas, imported poets, or libraries filled with scrolls you cannot read anyway. What you can afford is distraction, even if it is cheap wine that burns like vinegar, dice that seem to favour everyone else, or songs shouted into alleys until the watchmen break them up. Survival requires moments of forgetting, because if you remembered every hour of labour, every coin you do not have, every humiliation swallowed like stale bread, you would not rise in the morning. Taverns are the heartbeat of your world. Dark, smoky, packed into every alley, they smell of sweat, spilled wine, and desperation. A jar of the cheapest wine costs little, still more than you should spend, but less than the cost of sanity. You lean against a rough-hewn table sticky with old spills, surrounded by men as ragged as you, each one clutching a cup as if it contains salvation. Conversation flows as easily as the wine. Gossip about who was beaten at the market, who cheated at dice, which senator is rumoured to have collapsed drunk in the forum. Voices rise, tempers flare, fights erupt and die quickly, and always the laughter returns, bitter but genuine. For a few hours you are not poor, you are simply Roman, and that is enough. Dice are everywhere. You hear the rattle of knucklebones on stone steps, the slap of coins staked on outcomes, the groans of men who should have known better. Gambling is illegal in theory, tolerated in practice. Punished only when someone too important loses too much. You throw dice yourself because hope is addictive, because even the poorest man dreams of the one throw that changes everything. Of course, the dice are often weighted, the game's rigged, the outcome decided long before you play, but still, you play. The dream is worth more than the coins. If you crave spectacle, Rome supplies it in abundance. The circus opens its gates and the mob floods in, thousands packed shoulder to shoulder, roaring for chariots that fly around the track like thunder made flesh. You cheer for your faction, blues, greens, reds, whites, shouting yourself hoarse, wagering your last coin on a driver who has never even seen your face. Chariots crash, horses scream, the crowd surges, and for a few hours you are lifted out of yourself, carried on the tide of noise. When it ends, you return to your insula, poorer, hungrier, but strangely lighter. The amphitheatre offers blood. You sit high up, so far from the sand that the fighters look like insects. But the roar of the crowd carries the violence to you. Gladiators clash, beasts roar, men die, and you cheer because everyone cheers. Because in Rome, to remain silent while others shout is to draw attention. And attention for the poor is rarely good. You know the fights are staged, manipulated, sometimes even rigged for drama, but it does not matter. For the price of a few hours, you belong to something larger than your hunger. Bathhouses, too, are part of your life. Not the great marble halls where senators recline, but smaller, cheaper establishments where the water is tepid, the floors cracked, and the company no better than you are. Still, the baths are a gift. You scrape the filth of labour from your skin, soak your aches in the heat, gossip with neighbours in steam that hides more than it reveals. You feel, briefly, human again. Cleanliness may not last, but the memory of it carries you through another week. Festivals are Rome's grand distraction, days when the city forgets itself in honour of gods who probably stopped listening centuries ago. On Saturnalia, slaves wear their masters' clothes. Masters serve slaves, and everyone drinks themselves into oblivion. For once, you laugh at the absurdity of it. Watch as the lines of Rome blur and collapse. On Lupercalia, men run half naked through the streets, whipping women with strips of goatskin for fertility, and you join the crowd cheering, because Rome confuses chaos for devotion. On feast days, sacrifices fill the air with the stink of blood and incense. Temples overflow, and you push forward for a glimpse of ritual that promises protection, though you suspect the gods protect only those who can afford them. The Forum is another stage, even for you. You cannot speak there. Not really. Your voice means nothing among senators. But you can watch. You stand in the crowd, listening to lawyers declaim until their throats crack, watching magistrates parade in togas worth more than your block of insulage. You mock them quietly with your neighbours, laugh at their pomp, bet on which speech will collapse first under its own weight. The Forum is theatre for the rich, but even theatre spills crumbs to the audience, and you devour those crumbs eagerly. And yet, despite all the noise, the wine, the games, the gossip, there are nights when nothing distracts you. Nights when hunger gnaws too deeply, when your child coughs through the dark, when your neighbour is carried out feet first because the insula collapsed on him. On those nights, Rome feels less like eternity and more like a trap, a city designed to keep you moving, cheering, drinking, until you collapse into a grave too shallow to hold your resentment. But still, You rise. Still, you shuffle into taverns. Still, you throw dice. Still, you cheer at the circus. Still, you laugh at jokes too crude to repeat. Because if you stopped, if you looked too closely at the cracks, you would see what Rome truly is. A machine built to grind you down while convincing you to applaud the process. Work, if you can call it that, is never steady, never safe, never enough. You are not a senator with estates sprawling across the provinces, nor a merchant with ships crawling the seas, nor even a craftsman with a proper workshop and apprentices. You are one of the multitude, the mob that Rome feeds when it wishes and forgets when it does not. Employment is not a career, it is a dice throw, and most days the dice are loaded against you. The docks are your first refuge because Rome must eat, and grain flows in from Africa like lifeblood. The ships arrive heavy, creaking under the weight of wheat, barley, oil. Slaves unload most of it, bent and groaning under the whip, but there is always work for free men desperate enough. You join the line, shoulders straining as you hoist sacks nearly heavier than yourself, your back screaming with every step down the gangplank. The overseer shouts, curses, waves his rod, and you move faster because the pay is not enough to excuse slowness. At the end of the day, your hands are blistered, your body soaked in sweat, your pay barely enough to buy bread. But it is coin, and coin is survival. When the docks are empty, you turn to construction. Rome is always building temples, aqueducts, bathhouses, palaces for men who already own too many palaces. You haul stones, mix mortar, lift beams, hammer nails, always under the eyes of foremen who treat you as expendable. Accidents are common, deaths frequent, but there are always more men eager for the work. You build monuments you will never enter, aqueducts whose water will never reach your insula, theatres where you cannot afford a seat. You help shape Rome's grandeur, though Rome never shapes itself for you. Sometimes you sweep streets, shovel filth, or, if desperate, descend into the sewers, the cloaca maxima, where darkness and stench swallow you whole. You wade through muck, clearing blockages, rats skittering across your feet, the smell burrowing into your clothes so deep you carry it for days. No one thanks you. No one notices. Rome takes cleanliness for granted because men like you do the work of gods for the wage of beggars. If you cannot find work, you beg. You stand at crossroads, hands outstretched, eyes wide with practiced misery. Some passers-by drop coins, others spit, others sneer. Begging is shameful, but starvation is worse. And though Rome despises beggars, it cannot function without them. You are the reminder that poverty exists, the backdrop against which the rich display their generosity. Some turn to petty crime. A loaf stolen from a baker's stall, a purse cut from a distracted senator's belt, a jug of oil slipped from a merchant's cart. The risks are high, whippings, imprisonment, even crucifixion. But hunger makes risk taste like bread. You tell yourself you will not stoop to theft, but when your children cry with empty bellies, principles feel like luxuries. Women work as well, though their labour is valued even less. They spin wool, wash laundry in cold streams, sell vegetables in markets, sometimes sell themselves when nothing else remains. Children, too, are dragged into labour early, carrying buckets, selling trinkets, running errands. A family is not a sanctuary, it is a labour force. Survival is collective, each member pulling whatever weight they can, no matter how small. Debt is a constant shadow. You borrow from neighbours, from moneylenders, from anyone with coin to spare. Interest bleeds you dry, repayment is impossible, but without borrowing, you cannot eat. Rome's laws favour the lender, not the borrower. You risk prison, slavery, the loss of what little you have, but hunger is immediate and law is slow. Even when you earn, Rome takes. Taxes scrape away your coins, landlords demand rent for insulae that threaten to collapse, shopkeepers cheat with false weights. You are bled from every side, and yet you stagger on, because there is no alternative. Still, there are small victories. A day's pay that stretches far enough for meat instead of bread. A foreman who forgets to dock your wage. A neighbour who lends without interest. A lucky throw of dice that doubles your coin. Survival is not a triumph, but sometimes it feels like one. And through it all, you endure, because Rome demands endurance. The empire boasts of its roads, its aqueducts, its legions, its marble, but its true foundation is the poor. Your back, your sweat, your labour. You are the mortar between its stones, invisible, indispensable, and destined to be forgotten. Evening in Rome is a strange thing if you belong to the lower classes. For the rich, sunset means lamps lit in marble halls, couches prepared for reclining, musicians tuning lyres, slaves bustling with trays of delicacies. For you, sunset is the moment when survival changes costume. Day is labour, sweat, coin chasing, night is noise, smoke, hunger disguised as ritual, danger cloaked in shadows. You return to your insula, that precarious pile of brick and wood rising high over narrow streets, where each stair creaks like a warning, where each wall leans like it's tired of carrying its own weight. The air inside is thick, too many bodies, too little space, smoke from oil lamps curling up into beams already blackened with soot. Families crowd into rooms no larger than a senator's pantry, mats rolled out on the floor, a single chest for belongings, clay jars for water and food. Privacy is a rumour. Everything, eating, sleeping, arguing, loving, happens within earshot of a dozen neighbours, each one pretending not to notice because they have their own noise to ignore. Dinner is not a feast. It is survival, boiled, baked, or charred. A chunk of bread bought earlier, dipped into a thin stew made of lentils if fortune smiled, cabbage if it did not. On rare days, you have a scrap of meat, pork, most often, salted and tough, or fish so small it dissolves in the pot rather than flavouring it. You chew slowly, not because you savour, but because you need to convince your stomach that more is coming. Children eat first, adults share what remains. Wine, cheap and sour, is diluted with water, not to stretch the alcohol, but to disguise the taste of the water itself, which carries more disease than comfort. Conversation at dinner is not philosophy. No Plato, no Cicero, no debates on the nature of virtue. You talk about which neighbour was arrested, which child found work as an errand boy, whether the rent will rise again, whether the insula's stairs will last another week. You trade gossip about fires in another district, about grain shortages, about a senator caught cheating with a slave. Laughter erupts, but it is sharp, brittle, the laughter of people who know that none of these stories will change their own fates. After dinner, you step outside because the insula suffocates. The streets are alive, buzzing with the kind of energy that feels both communal and dangerous. Torches burn in brackets, throwing long shadows across walls plastered with election slogans, crude graffiti and advertisements for gladiatorial games. Vendors still hawk food, sausages hissing on coals, nuts roasted in baskets, wine ladled into clay cups for those who have a coin left to spare. Children chase each other barefoot, dogs snarl over scraps, musicians strum crude tunes on street corners, their bowls waiting for copper. But the streets after dark are not safe. Rome has no police in the sense you wish it did. The watchmen patrol with buckets and hooks, more concerned with fires than thieves, and thieves know it. Gangs prowl alleys, boys barely grown but armed with knives, eager to cut a purse, steal a loaf, or simply prove themselves. You keep your eyes down, your pace steady, your coin hidden in your tunic. If you must pass through a dark alley, you mutter a prayer to Mercury and hope the god of thieves takes pity rather than advantage. Fires are the great terror. Every night you sleep with the thought that a single overturned lamp, a careless ember, a drunk with a torch could send flames racing through your insula faster than you can run. There are no alarms, no water pumps, only shouting neighbours and a frantic scramble downstairs already clogged with panic. Families cling to each other, carrying what they can, tripping, falling, sometimes burning before they even reach the street. You've seen it happen. Everyone has. And so each night you lie on your mat, staring into the dark, ears pricked for the first scream that signals the end of everything you own. Still, there are small comforts. A neighbor sings to her child, voice thin but soothing. An old man tells stories of battles he claims to have fought, though everyone suspects he was a camp follower rather than a soldier. Women gather to spin wool, hands moving automatically while gossip fills the gaps in the night. A young couple argues in whispers, their words carrying through thin walls, but the anger is softened by the sound of laughter that follows. These are the fragments of life that make poverty bearable. Not wealth, not power, but the stubborn persistence of ordinary moments. Sometimes, when the air is cooler and your belly not entirely empty, you wander toward the Tiber. The river is dark, its surface broken by reflections of torchlight and the hulks of moored boats. Men fish in silence. Others squat to relieve themselves directly into the current, and the stench is overwhelming. Yet the river soothes. It flows, indifferent to Rome's noise, carrying waste, corpses, offerings, and dreams alike out toward the sea. You sit by its bank and wonder if you will ever see the sea yourself, or if your life will remain bound to these streets, these walls, this endless struggle. Back at your insula, sleep is an uncertain mercy. Mats are crowded close, bodies pressed together, snores blending with coughs. Fleas bite, rats scurry, children whimper in their dreams. You shift, turn, scratch, sigh. Sleep comes, but not gently. It drags you down like the Tiber, filling your head with half-formed images. Chariots roaring, overseers shouting, bread breaking, flames rising. You wake before dawn, not rested, but stunned, as if survival itself is exhausting. This is your evening, your night, your routine. Not poetry, not philosophy, not banquets. Just endurance, the art of continuing when continuation feels like folly. And yet, you endure, because Rome does not care whether you are happy, only whether you are present. Illness in Rome does not arrive politely. It crashes into your life like a collapsing insula, sudden, brutal, and entirely uninterested in whether you are prepared. And if you are poor, which you are, then illness is not an inconvenience. It is a sentence. The rich speak of treatment. They hire Greek physicians with fancy theories. They sip concoctions brewed from honey, wine, and exotic herbs. You, meanwhile, know that when fever comes, it will either leave or it won't, and the gods decide which. The streets are full of coughing. Children cough as they chase each other barefoot through the filth. Old men cough until they collapse. Women cough while stirring pots of stew too thin to nourish anyone. The cough is not just a sound. It is the anthem of poverty, echoing through alleys, bouncing off walls, blending with the squeal of pigs and the cries of vendors. You hear it every day, and every day you wonder which cough will fade and which will end with a body carried out on a board. Water is no friend. The aqueducts are miracles, yes, but by the time water flows through public fountains, it is shared by thousands of mouths, thousands of hands, thousands of diseases. You drink it because you must, but you know it carries sickness as faithfully as it carries thirst. Wells are little better, often tainted, sometimes poisoned deliberately when disputes between neighbours turn ugly. You boil it if you can afford oil for the fire, but most nights you cannot. And so you pray to Fortuna that the cup you raise tonight does not bury you tomorrow. Food sickens as much as it feeds. Grain arrives mouldy from damp holds, fish stink from rot, meat is salted to disguise its age rather than preserve it. You eat anyway, because hunger is worse than sickness. You chew tough bread baked black, you gnaw bones for marrow, you suck at wilted vegetables. Sometimes it kills you quickly. More often, it simply weakens you until some other misfortune finishes the job. And when plague comes, as it always does not distinguish. The The gods may favor the rich, but disease does not. You see senators carried out as often as beggars when fevers sweep through the city, though senators die in marble while you die in mud. The air grows heavy, temples overflow with offerings, priests slaughter endless animals in hopes of appeasing angry gods. Smoke chokes the streets, incense mingling with the stench of decay. Fires burn in pits where bodies are dumped, too many to bury properly, and you wonder whether the gods are pleased or whether they are laughing. Medical help? If you are lucky, a neighbor suggests herbs, charms, or prayers. An old woman may sell you a packet of dried leaves, promising healing if burned under your bed. A wandering healer may smear ointments on your skin, murmur words in Greek you do not understand, and vanish with your last coin. Sometimes it works, often it doesn't, and always you are left poorer. Real doctors, the ones who studied in Alexandria or Athens, do not enter your neighborhood. They serve the rich, dissecting theory while you cough blood into rags. Death is so common, you stop pretending it is extraordinary. A child dies in the morning, and by evening another is born down the street. An old man collapses at the bathhouse, and his spot is filled by someone younger before the water cools. A woman dies in childbirth. Her baby wails, her neighbors shake their heads, and then life continues. Funerals are short, perfunctory, sometimes absent altogether if the family cannot afford one. A poor man may be dumped in a common grave, lime poured over him, forgotten before the dirt settles. Superstition fills the gaps where medicine fails. You tie charms around your wrist, hang amulets in your insula, mutter prayers at crossroads, sprinkle wine on altars. You whisper to Mercury for protection from thieves, to Apollo for freedom from plague, to Jupiter for justice, though justice never arrives. You believe in curses, in the evil eye, in spirits of the restless dead. The world is too cruel to be random, so you invent order, invent reasons, invent hope. It doesn't heal you, but it makes the waiting less unbearable. Accidents kill as often as disease. Insulae collapse under their own shoddy weight, crushing families in their sleep. Fires sweep entire blocks, leaving only ashes where laughter once echoed. Streets crumble, carts overturn, horses kick, roofs fall. No warning, no prevention, no recompense. You are poor, and so the city kills you in ways large and small, not maliciously, not intentionally, but with the indifference of a machine that does not care if its gears grind bone. Children die most often. You bury more than you raise. Some live only days, others years, and each loss tears, but each loss also numbs. You learn not to name them too soon, not to hope too loudly. The rich build tombs, carve inscriptions, hire poets to immortalize their dead. You have memories, quickly fading, swallowed by the need to feed the living. You love your children fiercely, but you know better than to think love is enough to save them. Yet life persists. You rise each day, you eat, you work, you laugh when laughter comes. You accept sickness, bury your dead, and move forward. Resentment bubbles, yes, but it has no outlet. Rome does not pause for your grief. The market's still open, the baths still steam, the circus still roars. You live surrounded by death, and in time you learn to live with it, as if it were just another neighbor in the insula. Sometimes, late at night, when the coughing subsides and the city quiets, you wonder whether the gods see you at all, whether Jupiter on his throne knows your name, whether Apollo notices your fever, whether Pluto counts your soul among the multitudes. You wonder if the empire that boasts of eternity will even remember you lived. And then you close your eyes, not with peace, but with exhaustion, because whether remembered or forgotten, tomorrow demands your body again. You wake to the conclusion you have been rehearsing your whole life without ever naming it, that Rome calls itself eternal because it expects you to be temporary, that the city's marble is paid for in your ankles, your lungs, your teeth, your children's small gravestones, and that the only monument you will ever own is the habit of getting up again. You are not philosopher or senator, not a hero with a laurel crown or a monster with a triumph. Just a man or woman or child in a cheap tunic with a day to survive. And yet it occurs to you, as dawn scrapes colour onto the insular walls and the stair groans under someone else's hurry, that the empire rests more steadily on your ribs than on any emperor's shoulders, that the Anana moves because your back does, that the city's water runs because your hands unclog the mouths of its drains, that the circus roars because your throat learns the songs and your feet learn the way back home afterward. You step into the street and realise that what the rich call a city, the poor must call a schedule. The baker's oven coughing heat before the sun bothers. The fountain already crowded with women who sleep less than the aqueducts. The barber scraping a neighbour's stubble while telling a story he has told so often it now belongs to the city. The moneylender placing his stool exactly where yesterday's shadows promised customers would hesitate. The street preacher promising protection from the evil eye for a coin you cannot spare. The fishmonger lifting a mullet by the tail and swearing it was still swimming in Ostia at midnight. Rome is a choreography of necessities, and your steps are learned steps taught by hunger, rent, habit, and the memory of yesterday's mistakes. You used to envy the men in white togas who glide like swans through the forum. Now you envy them only for their insulation from time. Their hours fold neatly into dinners and decisions, while yours clump like damp flour into labour, waiting, and the little gaps where you cram joy. But you have discovered something their marble has not, that the city's pulse is in the uncelebrated repetitions, the way you can sweep a street while holding a conversation and a prayer in your mouth at the same time, the way your neighbour always saves the end of his loaf for the boy 2 doors down, the way a row of grapevines on a rooftop can turn August into something survivable, the way a handful of figs shared on a stoop becomes proof that generosity is not an aristocratic invention. You were told as a child that Rome's greatness was its roads, and you have walked enough of them now to accept the compliment on behalf of your blisters. It is fashionable for senators to say "Vie militaris" with their chins raised, as if the stones laid themselves under the marching feet of history, but you know whose calloused hands set them, who hauled the gravel, who broke the rock, who bled into the mortar. Even the milestones, those smug cylinders that announce how far you are from someone else's idea of important, stand on the ankles of men like you. The legions that thunder along them may conquer the world. You are the one who sweeps the dust after they have passed. You and the old woman with a broom that cost more than her shoes. Sometimes a soldier talks to you in the tavern, the metal of his decorations bright under smoke. He thinks you envy him his belt and his regular bread. You do not tell him you envy him only his steady wage and basic funeral rites. You pour him another cup and let him talk about Parthia or Germania or the damp ends of Britannia where the wind eats bones, and you recognize in his voice the same arithmetic you do every morning. How much to give the city today for the chance of tomorrow? He will be granted a plot of land in a colony if he lives, and you will be granted a shelf in a columbarium if you can convince the burial club to accept you. Rome keeps everyone's ledger. The sums differ. The principle does not. You have learned to recognize the seasons by the quality of the city's lies. In winter, every sack of grain looks smaller. In spring, every politician looks generous. In summer, every fountain looks pure. In autumn, every promise looks like it was meant for someone else. The grain dole, Annona, arrives most days, and on the days it doesn't, the line forms anyway, because hope keeps the queue straight. You stand in it with everyone else, labourers, widows, old men who once could carry amphorae on their shoulders and now can barely carry their own names. And you feel the democracy Rome actually practices. Not the vote, not the law, but the shared humiliation of dependence. You tell jokes to survive the waiting, and the jokes become a kind of currency, worth more than bronze when the clerk announces the granaries are shut. Your gods have multiplied since childhood. Jupiter thunders as always. Mars collects his rent in suns. Mercury laughs into his sleeve every time a purse goes missing, but below them, in niches and corners and on shelves blackened by lamp smoke, hundreds of smaller gods and imported cults crowd closer. Egyptian Isis with her impenetrable smile, Anatolian Magna Mater banging drums loud enough to drown hunger, a Jewish god who refuses statues and speaks of a Sabbath you cannot afford, a small Eastern cult whispering about a crucified man whose poor disciples meet in houses as cramped as yours. You do not know which god listens. You speak to whichever is closest when the stairs groan at midnight. Priests smell of incense and security. Your prayers smell of onions, smoke, and the work they must survive. Illness sits at your table even when you have no food for guests. You have made peace with the cough that moves through insulae like a bored landlord, with the sudden fevers that take healthy men on Monday and leave their wives washing boards on Friday, with the flux that empties your body quicker than your purse. You have become brisk at funerals, too brisk, you think sometimes, and you have become good at recognizing which neighbor will not survive the next winter. You join a burial club because the city requires more coin from the dead than from the living, and the thought of being dumped into a trench with strangers terrifies you more than death itself. You pay your dues when you can, and when you cannot, your friends cover you because they know you will cover them when their luck breaks, and luck always breaks. There are days when the circus feels like a riot that someone remembered to schedule. You go because everyone goes, because factions, blue, green, let you put on a costume of belonging, because the sound of 50,000 throats roaring the same word is the closest thing to miracle you have ever known. You cheer, you swear, you shove. You feel alive in a way work never lets you. You know it is a trick, that while you shout for a driver risking his spine, you are not shouting at the men who make you risk yours. But the trick works. The city releases its pressure through your voice. You go home hoarse and for a few hours sleep without hearing the insular complain. You have, over time, developed a philosophy that would make a Greek Blanche. Do what gets you to tomorrow. It is not elegant, but it keeps your children breathing. It means saying yes to labor you hate because refusing offers no shelter. It means lending coin you cannot spare because the neighbor who owes you to the gods will lend you a bucket when the stairs catch fire. It means taking the cheap job today rather than waiting for the fair job that never comes. It means laughing at men who mock you for not understanding politics because their politics do not understand you either. Now and then, someone from the higher stories of Rome, an aristocrat in a litter with a bored face and a tired ring, bothers to look down. He throws coins at children as if feeding pigeons, funds games as if curing hunger, staffs a soup line during a plague as if confessing a sin. He enjoys too much to stop. You shout thanks because the coins are real, the soup is hot, and children, like pigeons, will peck where feed falls. But you do not mistake his glance for fellowship. You are part of his theatre. He is not part of your life. You wonder how he sleeps under ceilings that do not complain. You hope, for justice's sake, that his wine tastes of ash on some nights. When it rains, Rome becomes honest. The alleys reveal their slope, carrying filth downhill to the Tiber like a liturgy. The roofs admit what they always knew, that walls here are suggestions. Your sandals slip on worn stones, your tunic clings. The market stalls throw sacking over fruit too tired to be convincing. You buy soup, you share it with the boy who shines shoes with spit and bravado, and you admire the way he says, "sir," to men who do not deserve it. He will enlist, or drown, or grow teeth sharp enough to cut leather and law. You will attend his funeral or his wedding, or neither, because the city sometimes forgets to tell you which. You have made peace with theft when it is survival, and no peace at all when it is sport. You will steal a loaf if your daughter's ribs count stronger than the magistrate's speech. You will not steal a neighbour's blanket. You will steal a glance at the chariots you cannot afford to bet on and pretend the roar belongs to you for a heartbeat. You will not steal from the burial club because you know what it costs to buy space from forgetfulness. You are morale the way a man on a small raft is a captain. You keep it afloat and afterward decide which rules you observed. In the baths, you learn equality, the Roman way, nakedness that reveals scars more honestly than togas reveal ideas. The wealthy sweat, the poor sweat, the water insults everyone equally. You sit on hot stone and trade lies about women, bosses, gods, and you believe none of the lies but all of the laughter. In the steam, you are a citizen of a different city, the one where rank fogs and jokes ascend like prayers. For an hour, you forgive Rome because it has forgiven you enough to let you into its water. You are not without pride. When the aqueduct arches above you, you push your children's chins up and make them look until they see what engineering looks like when it is paid for with coin and corpses. You cheer when a bridge holds under a flood, when grain ships brave a storm and make it anyway, when a fire is stopped 3 insulae away from yours because men with hooks showed up before wind did. Your pride is local, specific, stitched from repairs and reprieves, not from marble proclamations. You say, "We saved that street," even if you did nothing more than form a bucket line and not panic. You do not dream of climbing into a toga. You are not stupid. You do dream of small things that feel like revolutions. A landlord who repairs stairs before the gods do. A steady day's hiring without a foreman's whip. A festival where the meat does not vanish into magistrates' sleeves. A child who outlives your fear long enough to frighten you with other possibilities. Your horizon is not the empire, it is the next rent. Your ambition is not office, it is a week without choosing which mouth eats less. Sometimes a scribe at the forum reads a law aloud, a new edict from an emperor who has never smelled your street, and you watch the crowd do the arithmetic. Which of us is this aimed at? Taxes shift like dice in a cheater's cup. Penalties lengthen, arms shrink, and yet a poet will still compose a line about Roman justice that is so beautiful you almost forgive the lie. You memorize it anyway because beauty is allowed to be a thief. It steals the sting from an hour and returns nothing but a humming. The city will, on a good day, call you plebs romana, as if that were a medal and not a label. On a better day, it will call you testudo, a tortoise, when you and your neighbours raise shields, pots, shawls, curses against whatever falls from above. Tiles, law, fire, soldiers drunk on victory or pay or both. On a worse day, it will call you vulgus, the crowd, and forget that crowds are made of throats and throats are made of names. You have learned to answer to all of them and none, to keep your name for the burial tablet if coin permits, for the lamplight whisper if it does not. You think sometimes of leaving, of following a road that points away from the city. Men do, women too, though fewer return to tell it. They seek land in colonies, labour in villas farther from the stink, gamble on provinces where grain grows without a bribe. Some send letters back, most send silence. You tie your hope to the doorpost and do not untie it. Rome is a trap you know, and traps you know are easier to step around each day than traps you don't. When you stand in the shade of a temple and watch a triumph roll by, elephants painted, prisoners roped, generals shining, you feel the trick work one more time. You cheer, because cheering costs less than not. The city seems a single animal, breathing, roaring, agreeing for a heartbeat that it is magnificent. Then the drums fade and your stomach resumes, and magnificence melts into errands. You step into its steam and vanish like everyone else, and the empire seems no smaller for losing you. Here is the truth you will not see carved in marble. Rome survives because you decide, each morning, to put your feet on its stones. It is not an idea, not a senate, not an emperor, not a legion. It is you and the woman next door, and the boy with the shoe rag, and the old man with the cough who still finds breath to curse the landlord. When you die, and you will, and the city will not slow, you will be replaced instantly by another you, drawn by hunger and rumour, taught by stairs and fountains, enrolled in the only school the poor attend. Repetition. The city will continue to claim eternity, you will have given it another day. So how does it end? Not in a way you will see. For you, endings are small. A cartwheel that takes a hand, a fever that takes a child, a brick that takes a skull, a fire that takes a block. The big endings, the sackings, the invasions, the emperors strangled in baths, are stories told in taverns. You trade them like dice, knowing you will never be in the room where their real work is done. You will perhaps notice that the grain line grows longer, that the watch grows thinner, that the fountains sputter sometimes where once they ran smugly. You will shrug and buy a cup of wine cut with as much water as the vendor thinks you will accept, and you will say, as your father did, "Rome's tired today, and the cup will be asked to fix it." You do not hate the city, not entirely. Hate would require distance and energy. You are entangled with it. It is the market that feeds you and the landlord that bleeds you, the circus that numbs you and the street that trips you, the fountain that saves you and the sewer that gossips about you. You curse it, you bless it, you bury children in its dirt and carve names for them with a nail in stucco because stonecutters charge too much. You love a woman who laughs even when the pot boils dry. You love a boy who brings home a stale roll as if it were Alexandria. You love a neighbor who shares salt when he has none. You love a dog that follows you as if gods could be loyal. This is eternity, not marble, not law, not conquest. This. If a scribe came and asked for your wisdom, you would not hand him Cicero. You would hand him the smell of wet wool in February, the weight of a grain sack when the foreman is already looking for a reason to dock you, the sound of dice when you swear you will not throw them, the first bite of bread when the line finally moved, the warmth of the bath when your back stops shouting for an hour, the feel of your daughter's head heavy on your forearm when sleep finally wins. You would say, "Write this down. We kept it moving." And he would frown because it is not a sentence men carve into arches. But it is the only sentence you ever needed. We kept it moving. The fountain water, the grain to the granary, the gossip to the afternoon, the bucket to the balcony when the fire woke everyone at once, the laughter across the landing when the insula didn't fall this time, the city on its rails of habit, the empire on its roads of backs. We kept it moving. And when you are done, when your mat welcomes you one last time and the cough finally wins its argument, your neighbours will come, as they came for others, and lift you the way you lifted sacks, and carry you the way you carried water, and pay, if they can, for a tile with your name, and pour a little wine on your doorstep you can no longer cross. The city will not notice. How could it? But the landing will feel your absence for a week, and the fountain will echo your laughter for a month. And the boy with the shoe rag will grow into a man who tells a story about you that is kinder than the truth. And that will be enough. Rome will continue, calling itself eternal. Let it. You have done your part, which was never to be remembered in marble, but to be folded into the mortar that holds the marble up. If any god is listening, and if any god deserves your coin, it is the one that keeps stairs standing one more night. You leave a coin at that shrine when you have it, a small, ridiculous gesture. And the city, ridiculous and small in its own way despite all its size, takes it and pretends not to smile. Tomorrow, another you will wake to the groan of beams, the cough through the wall, the rat's squeal. Another you will step into the street and learn the choreography from scratch. Another you will keep it moving. That is the secret of eternity Rome never writes down. You are the mechanism, the marble is the mask. You wake before dawn because your life is measured not by the rising of the sun, but by the rhythm of someone else's hunger, thirst, vanity, and whims. And no celestial body dares compete with the demands of a Roman household that considers itself civilized, merely because its walls are painted and its floors tessellated with little bits of stone that form dolphins and vines. You lie on your thin straw mat in a corner that smells of damp plaster and human resignation, staring into the dark, waiting for the moment when you cannot justify staying horizontal any longer. Eventually, you rise, because the household rises. Even if most of its masters are still asleep, You do not eat, not yet. Eating is for those who work less. Your first task is to stoke the coals, coax a reluctant flame back to life in the kitchen hearth, cough through the smoke that curls upward and clings to the rafters like a lazy god. If you are lucky, there is leftover bread from yesterday, hard enough to chip a tooth, which you soften with water and chew quietly so the sound does not offend anyone who believes breakfast should arrive by invisible magic. You drink what passes for water, trying not to notice the taste of lead leached from the pipes, and you get on with it. The villa begins to stir, not all at once, but in stages, like an animal waking. First, the kitchen fills with clatter, then the courtyard echoes with footsteps, then the halls start to hum with voices, slaves like you, rushing, carrying, whispering, each one trying not to be the first noticed or the first punished. The master's family sleeps late, cushioned by the knowledge that the city bends itself around their schedule. You, on the other hand, bend yourself into shapes that gods never intended just to avoid being called lazy. You sweep the atrium, brush dust into corners, polish bronze lamps until they shine with a brightness their owners will never notice. You fetch water from the impluvium, that decorative pool in the center of the house designed to impress guests more than quench thirst. You refill oil lamps, arrange cushions, shake out linens, all so that when the master finally emerges yawning, he believes the world woke just to serve him. He may glance at you, he may not. Your job is to ensure that either way, nothing looks neglected. The kitchen is chaos, which is to say, it is functioning as intended. Smoke, shouting, the hiss of oil in pans, the grinding of grain. You take orders from the cook, who takes orders from no one because he considers himself an artist, even though most of his artistry involves disguising spoiled fish with strong sauces. You chop onions until your eyes burn, slice meat, stir pots of porridge that smell of wheat and ashes. Your hands are busy, your stomach growls, and you remind yourself that tasting is forbidden until the master's family has eaten. Though you know plenty of slaves who risk a beating for a stolen mouthful, hunger dulls fear, fear dulls hunger. Both dull life. By mid-morning, the master rises. His sandals slap the mosaic floor, his toga drags across the dust you missed, and he clears his throat in a way that signals he wants wine before he even speaks. You pour it, water it down as instructed, and hand it over with both hands, eyes lowered, because a man's dignity rests heavily on the angle at which you bow. He nods maybe, and goes to sit in the peristyle where sunlight filters through the columns and makes him look like he deserves everything you will never have. Breakfast for him is light, bread, cheese, figs, carried in on trays polished so thoroughly you can see your exhaustion reflected back at you. Breakfast for you is still a dream deferred. You stand by, invisible, waiting for crumbs that may or may not fall. You know your place, to hover, to anticipate, to endure. If he calls, you run. If he ignores you, you remain. If he insults you, you smile. You wear obedience like a mask so tight you sometimes forget the shape of your own face beneath it. The mistress appears next, draped in fabric dyed at a cost that could have fed your family for a year. She complains that the bath is too cold, the perfume too weak, the sandals too stiff. You adjust, you apologize, you promise. All the while thinking that a life of wealth seems to produce more dissatisfaction than relief. She scolds you for moving too slowly, though your hands are raw from speed. She scolds you for not moving at all, though you're frozen in place, awaiting instruction. The mistress's day begins with reminders that you exist only to absorb her discontent. Other slaves join you, each trapped in their own orbit of servitude. The young boy who tends the master's horse and smells perpetually of sweat and hay. The woman who braids the mistress's hair until her fingers ache. The old man whose back is so bent from years of carrying amphorae that he now carries only insults. You all share glances, but rarely words. Solidarity is dangerous, conversation riskier than silence. Still, in the corners of the house, in the shadows of corridors, you whisper enough to know you are not alone. Outside, Pompeii wakes too. You hear the sounds drifting over the villa walls, the creak of carts on stone streets, the bark of vendors selling bread, the calls of children chasing each other through the forum. The city is alive, bustling, full of trade and gossip and ambition. You imagine being part of it, not as property, not as shadow, but as someone with choices, with coins, with a life not measured by another man's schedule. You imagine it, and then you turn back to polishing silver, because imagination is free but dangerous if it lingers too long. By noon, the house is humming, full of orders and counter-orders, tasks half done and redone, errands dispatched and returned. You carry jars of oil, fold linens, run messages, stand for hours in corners waiting to be useful. You sweat through your tunic, feel the ache in your shoulders, ignore the blister forming on your heel. No one asks if you are tired. No one cares if you are. Tiredness is not an excuse when you belong to someone else. And yet, despite the exhaustion, despite the constant vigilance, you know this is just another day. Nothing special. No omens yet. The mountain looms in the distance as it always has, a silent backdrop you rarely consider. Because what is a mountain to someone who already lives under the weight of another human being? It smokes faintly sometimes, yes, but you assume that's just what mountains do, the same way masters sigh when they want more wine. You live under threats every day, whips, punishments, hunger, and so the mountain's subtle warnings fold into the background noise of survival. You do not know, as you carry a tray of figs across the courtyard, that history is about to notice you. You do not know, as you kneel to scrub dirt from the mosaic, that ash will one day record the exact curve of your spine. You do not know, as you hurry to answer the mistress's call, that the day you woke to is the last ordinary day you will ever have. For now, it is just morning in Pompeii, and you are just a servant, and life is still pretending it will go on forever. You step into the street because the master has sent you to fetch oil, bread, and some rumour he half remembers from yesterday's forum speech, as if gossip were a commodity to be carried home in amphorae. The city air hits you like a wet cloth, thick with the stink of fish from the harbour, sweat from men already bent under loads of grain, smoke from bakeries that never rest because Rome expects its bread, even when Vesuvius mutters under his breath. You keep your eyes down because a slave with an upward gaze invites trouble, and trouble in Pompeii wears sandals polished by other slaves' hands. The streets are loud, cartwheels grind against stone, vendors shout over one another, women haggle like warriors with knives disguised as words. You pass the public fountain, where lines already snake long, slaves and freedmen jostling with clay jars, muttering about how the water tastes different lately, a tang of sulphur, a heaviness on the tongue. You drink anyway, because thirst does not respect omens. At the bakery, men haul baskets of loaves so hot they scorch their palms, and the air is thick with the smell of yeast and char. You remember the boy who died last week, crushed when an oven collapsed, and how his family was given nothing but ashes in return. You wait your turn, hand over the coins you were given, receive bread baked darker than usual. No one complains, because hunger is not a philosopher, and bad bread is still bread. In the forum, the world of Pompeii parades itself in miniature. Senators strut as if the empire depends on their sandals. Merchants shout about goods from Syria and Egypt. Priests chant before altars smeared with blood from animals who didn't volunteer. You stand at the edge, invisible, listening. The talk is of Rome, always Rome, as if the empire beyond these walls matters more than the ground underfoot. Taxes, trade, politics, words that weigh less than the amphora you will carry home, but crush just as surely if you repeat them in the wrong ear. You hear whispers too. The fishmongers say the sea pulled back strangely yesterday, as if it had lost interest in the shore. Farmers mutter about animals refusing to drink, dogs barking at shadows, chickens laying fewer eggs. A priest shrugs, calls it the will of the gods, pockets his offering. The city listens, nods, laughs, forgets. Because what else is there to do? Life demands you keep walking even when the ground trembles. And tremble it does. A small shiver under your feet, so brief you almost think you imagined it. A jar rattles on a vendor's stall, a child squeals, a woman curses the gods for playing dice with her balance. Then it stops. The crowd resumes. Rome has taught its people to endure worse than shaking ground. You move on, clutching bread to your chest, pretending your heart isn't still pounding. You run other errands. Oil from the merchant whose scales always tilt in his favor, herbs from the old woman whose hands shake, but whose remedies sometimes work. A jug of cheap wine because the master's thirst outruns his dignity. You weave through alleys painted with obscene graffiti, through courtyards where men dice away their wages, past bathhouses where steam rises like false promises. Pompeii is alive, obscene, beautiful, cruel, all at once, always. At one corner, you pause, because the air smells wrong. Not the usual stew of dung, sweat and fish, but sharper, metallic, like the mountain itself has begun to exhale. A dog growls, hackles raised. Its master drags it away, muttering about madness. You stand still, breathe deep, wonder if anyone else notices. A man spits, calls it bad wind, and everyone laughs. You laugh too, because not laughing makes you the fool. By midday, the streets are hotter, the sun blazing down on plastered walls that flake under your touch. You pass a fresco of Venus painted in colours so bright you almost forget your errands. She smiles eternally, hips tilted, as if even gods prefer Pompeian walls to Olympus. You wonder if she watches, if she notices the way cracks creep up the plaster, small, almost invisible. You shake your head, keep moving. You return to the villa heavy with bread, oil, gossip, sweat. The master takes the bread without thanks, dips it in oil, complains it tastes stale. The mistress scolds you for being slow, though you know she never checked the time. You bow, apologize, bite your tongue until you taste blood. That is your coin. Apology, silence, obedience. You spend it freely because you have no choice. The day drags. You fetch water again, sweep again, polish again. The heat presses down, heavier than usual, the air thick, hard to breathe. Others notice it too. Slaves whisper of dizziness, of fainting spells, of smoke rising faintly from the mountain's peak. You glance once, quickly, see the thin column twisting upward like incense offered to indifferent gods. You look away, because staring at mountains does not fill amphorae. Afternoon brings errands within the house, preparing for a dinner that promises more food than you will see in a month. You scrub floors, arrange couches, wash plates, polish goblets until they blind you with reflected light. You carry jars of wine, haul water, chase dogs from the atrium, bow when the master's friends arrive. They talk politics, laugh loudly, boast of conquests. You pour wine, refill cups, listen without hearing, all the while noticing how the air tastes of ash though no fire burns nearby. A slave girl whispers as she passes you. Birds flew away this morning, hundreds at once, leaving the trees empty. You nod, say nothing, because omens are dangerous to repeat. But the thought lingers. Birds know things people refuse to learn. Evening approaches, and with it, the promise of relief. You imagine your mat, your corner, a stolen crust of bread, sleep. But the mountain smokes more now, the tremors stronger, the air sharper. Something is coming. You feel it in your chest, in your bones, in the silence between words. Pompeii continues, laughing, feasting, arguing, but beneath it all runs a current of unease, as if the city itself holds its breath. And you, servant, slave, shadow, you are caught in the rhythm. You polish, you pour, you bow, you obey. The world shifts beneath your feet, and you pretend it doesn't. Because what else can you do? For now, it is still just a day in Pompeii, By evening, the villa has transformed itself into a stage, because the master has decided that tonight he must play the role of generous host, which means that you and every other servant are condemned to play supporting characters in a performance where the lines are sweat, silence, and submission. The couches in the triclinium are laid out, their cushions beaten into shape as if plump stuffing were proof of Roman virtue. Lamps are lit, filling the air with the sharp tang of oil. Platters of food are prepared in the kitchen, fish garnished with herbs, roasted meats, bowls of olives, loaves of bread cut into neat slices as if geometry could disguise staleness, and you move among it all like a shadow, invisible until someone notices a flaw, and then you become the most visible creature in the room. Guests arrive with the kind of laughter that sounds rehearsed. Men in togas too white to be practical, women draped in jewellery that jingles like an accusation. They enter with noses raised, sniffing at the painted walls as though they expect frescoes to rearrange themselves in awe. You bow, you greet, you fetch wine, you hold trays. They barely notice you, except when they do. And then it is always the wrong kind of attention. An order barked too sharply, a comment about your speed, a joke at your expense disguised as wit. The master plays his part flawlessly. He boasts of his connections, of his trade, of his friendship with men in Rome whose names he drops like coins into a beggar's bowl. He gestures broadly, sips wine, laughs too loudly at his own stories. The mistress sits beside him, smiling thinly, her eyes scanning the room for anyone whose dress is newer than hers. The guests laugh, eat, gossip. The house hums with vanity disguised as conversation, with gluttony disguised as celebration. And then the first real sign arrives, not in the form of fire or collapse, but as dust. Fine, grey, settling quietly across the marble floor near the open doors to the courtyard. At first you think it is just soot from the lamps, or flour from the kitchen, but when you wipe it away it leaves your fingers gritty. You glance up, see the faintest flakes drifting down from the sky, like snow that has forgotten how to be beautiful. You freeze, tray in hand, until another servant nudges you forward, whispering not to stare. You continue serving. That is your role. The guests do not notice at first, or if they do, they pretend not to. The master waves a hand, calls it nothing, perhaps dust from the mountain, as though mountains are in the habit of shedding skin during dinner. Everyone laughs uneasily. You keep pouring wine. But then the tremor comes. Not violent, not enough to topple lamps or send goblets rolling, but enough to make the floor shiver beneath your feet, enough to rattle the bronze bowls stacked in the kitchen, enough to make the mistress's face tighten for just a moment before she smooths it with a smile. A guest jokes about Neptune shifting in his sleep. Another mutters that the gods are restless. You stand still, tray balanced, heart hammering, waiting for the world to stop trembling. When it does, everyone exhales, laughs too loudly again, and drinks more wine. The kitchen grows hotter than usual, the air thick with smoke and sweat. You run back and forth with dishes, honey cakes, cheese, roasted fowl, while your ears strain for more tremors. The other slaves whisper when the guests are not listening. The mountain smokes more, the ash falls thicker, the animals are restless. One girl says she saw a mule refuse to step into the street earlier. You nod, say nothing, keep moving. Fear is dangerous when spoken aloud. Outside, the air grows darker, though it is not yet night. You glimpse it when you pass the courtyard. The sky, heavy, stained with grey, as if evening has arrived too soon. The ash falls thicker now, coating the impluvium's water in a thin film, settling on the mosaics like a new design no artist asked for. You brush it away, but it returns. Guests glance at it, murmur, but the master insists it is nothing, that Pompeii has seen tremors before, that mountains smoke sometimes. He waves his hand as though dismissing an annoying slave, but the air changes. You feel it in your chest, in the weight on your tongue when you breathe. It is heavier, sharper, as though the sky itself has turned to stone dust and decided to lodge in your lungs. Guests cough between bites of fish. The mistress fans herself more vigorously. A child whimpers in the corner, ignored by parents too busy listening to gossip about Rome. And then comes the sound, low at first, distant, like thunder rolling in from the sea. But it does not fade. It grows, a steady roar, deeper than any storm, older than the city itself. The guests pause, cups half raised, laughter cut short. They look at each other, then at the master, waiting for him to declare it harmless. He opens his mouth, closes it, drains his goblet instead. The slaves exchange glances. You all know what the masters will not admit. Something is wrong. Very wrong. You think of the animals, the ash, the tremors, the smell in the air. You think of the mountain looming always at the edge of sight, silent for years, now growling like a beast that has remembered its hunger. But the performance continues, because it must. Food is served, wine flows, laughter returns. Forced now, brittle, sharp at the edges. The master insists on a song, so a musician plucks at strings, his hands trembling. The mistress forces a smile, her eyes darting toward the courtyard where the ash falls thicker with every breath. You stand at your post, tray balanced, lungs tight, wondering how long a city can pretend nothing is happening, while the sky itself begins to collapse. And then, finally, one guest speaks the words everyone avoids. Perhaps we should leave. The room falls silent. The master laughs, too loudly, insists there is no danger. But the others shift uncomfortably, their eyes betraying doubt. The tremors return, stronger this time, rattling the lamps, sloshing wine across polished floors. The roar outside deepens. You grip your tray, feel the ash on your skin, taste it in your mouth. The performance is ending, whether the masters admit it or not. And you, servant, slave, shadow, you know the mountain is no longer content to be ignored. You do not remember when the dinner becomes a flight drill, only that one moment you are holding a tray and trying to pretend the grey in the impluvium is nothing but dust. And the next you are in the tablinum helping the steward unhook the strongbox because the master, who has just announced that sensible men do not panic, has decided that sensible men also do not leave silver behind. The house shudders again. The bronze lamps shiver. A hairline crack creeps down a painted wall through a myth of Venus as if the goddess herself is tired of it. And somewhere in the kitchen, a stack of bowls goes to ground in a clatter you will hear in your sleep if sleep ever bothers with you again. Someone says, "To the cellar." Someone else says, "To the sea." And the mistress says nothing at all, only stands very straight and presses a hand to her necklace. In that way rich women do when the world reminds them that ownership ends at skin. The courtyard is a logic problem written in ash. Pumice stones the size of walnuts begin to ping off the tiles, then the size of fists, then the size of unforgivable errors. Each one seems light enough alone, but together they accumulate the way obligations do, quietly, inexorably, until a roof that was harmless at noon becomes a wager at dusk. You grab a basket because someone must, because the steward is shrieking about documents and seals, and the master wants his signet and his accounts and his gods, always the gods, the little household lares from the lararium in their painted niche. You wrap the tiny statues in a cloth because your hands move without your permission, and because you suspect the gods, if they are paying attention, will prefer a soft landing. The plan, insofar as panic has room for plans, is to make for the gate while there is still a gate, to join the river of bodies already surging eastward under a sky that has decided to be night without asking the sun's opinion. You tie a strip of wet linen over your mouth, the way someone's grandmother once advised. The water drawn from the impluvium now filmed with ash that coats your tongue like an accusation. The mistress orders her litter readied because habits die harder than men, and you and two others shoulder the poles because the bearers from the street did not come when called. and in any case, their own families are not props in your performance. The master barks names, loses them, barks again. A child clings to the seam of his mother's stola, and a dog lunges, choking at the end of a rope because someone tied him earlier to keep him from begging. And in the new arithmetic of mercy, you take the half-breath it costs to slice the knot with a kitchen knife and watch him streak away. A grateful escape you are not yet granted. Out through the vestibule, the ash already ankle-deep, light as flour until it is not, and the first step into it surprises you because the world has never behaved like sand indoors. Each footfall sinks, slides, pulls, and soon you are lifting your knees high like a drunken soldier in a parade you did not choose. Above, the mountain roars. No other word will do. A continuous animal sound too big to be a voice, too steady to be a storm, too furious to be anything but a god you were wrong about. The air no longer tastes merely dusty. It tastes sharp, metallic, like coins clenched between teeth, like old blood on a rusty nail, like a forge has misplaced its chimney and found your lungs. The streets are theatre and stampede at once. Everybody has decided to be somebody else. Senators in travelling cloaks elbowing like stevedores, shopkeepers clutching their ledgers like children, prostitutes dragging clients by the wrist as if sin has earned the right to live longer, matrons shrieking at slaves to carry statues that will be heavy in any world, physicians with their satchels and no medicine for ash, a poet still composing as he coughs because he cannot bear not to make a metaphor from the end. Pillows bloom on heads, real pillows, tied down with cords and belts, a ridiculous fashion that would be funny if it were not smart. You snatch one from the mistress's couch and wedge it under the litter pole because you have seen how the pumice finds skulls. Everywhere bodies, some surging toward the Sarno gate because they have decided the river will be kinder than streets, some toward the sea gate because ships mean rescue in stories even when the shore heaves and the water moves in ways a river should not. Some, fools or saints, toward the forum to ask the priests what the gods want, as if the gods have not already said it loudly enough. You angle for the sea gate because the master says Pliny will save us, as if naming a famous admiral conjures hulls from ash. You want to say ships have oars, not wings, but the linen over your mouth reminds you have been paid not to talk. Between house fronts, the darkness becomes almost complete, lit only by lamps hammered to life by men who thought they had retired them hours ago. Their flames gutter and dance as tremors ripple underfoot, and each shock dislodges more tiles, more marble chips, more fragments of fresco that flutter down like end-of-day confetti. A cart overturns, pinning a man's leg, his scream ducked under the roar. Two slaves heave, fail, heave again, succeed, and he limps away, leaving gratitude in the ash because there is no space for it anywhere else. Somewhere glass breaks, somewhere a statue falls, somewhere someone prays in Greek because Latin seems too blunt for this. You pass a doorway where a woman stands paralyzed, a baby at her breast, her eyes tracking nothing, her mouth open around a word that refuses to arrive. The mistress tells you not to look, the master tells you to hurry, but you look anyway, and there is the first keen slice of understanding. Not that you will die, you've known that all your life, but that you may die today and be found later with your hands on something that was not yours. You grip the litter harder and promise the room inside your skull you will not be the sort of person who dies politely. At the corner by the thermopolium, the ash deepens to your calves and then to your knees. Lapili patter, bouncing off shoulders, heads wood. Your back begins to seize in complaint, and the boy on the other pole slips, goes to his elbow, coughs, and upends the litter so that the mistress rolls elegantly into a drift of white and rises unregally, spitting and clawing at her ornaments. She slaps the boy because training outruns apocalypse, and he stares at her with a kind of clean fury you have never seen on his face in daylight. You write the litter. The master swears he will report this to someone. The mountain adds its own report. Another tremor. Bigger. A wall ahead yawns open like a punished mouth and belches a cloud of dust that turns your world to felt. You cannot see your own hands. You have never realized how much you needed to. People push from every direction at once because panic does not know the difference between forward and everywhere. The litter sways, someone's elbow drives into your ribs. You gasp and swallow ash and learn the ash insists on being a body too. A hand finds your sleeve. The cook, eyes wide, face greyly streaked, a clay lamp cupped in his palm like a little son he is terrified to drop. He says something, cellar or temple or impossible, and you shake your head because in the mathematics of now, you have been assigned one equation: move. At last, the darkness thins by degrees into a murky night, and the sea gate is there, half choked with people, choked with pumice, choked with animals that thought they were invited. Mules braying, dogs howling, a goat standing on someone's shoulders because goats will always find the high ground even in bad fiction. Beyond the arch there is a smear of something like horizon, and for a moment the whole crowd pauses together, the rare unity of species, and listens. The roar, yes, but a new noise too, like great cloth ripping, like 10,000 amphorae shattering in one room, like a god instructing clouds how to break. Over your left shoulder, a smear of lightning scribbles in the ash column, forkless, aimless, obscene. Somebody crosses himself, somebody else throws a pinch of salt into it because the old woman at his building said, "Salt bothers demons." You make it under the arch because physics is still voting in your favor, and because the boy with the pillow wrapped around his skull has decided he will not drop that corner again, even if it kills him. You think you might love him if living were part of the bargain. Outside, the slope toward the shore is a white river that flows upward when your feet try to flow down. Roofs collapse behind in soft implosions that sound like sighs from giants who are tired of architecture. Far off, low lamps bob, boats, or hope, which is the same thing when you are ash to your hips. The master points, as if pointing makes distance smaller. You feel the first real heat then, not the kitchen kind, but the kind that tells you the world is practicing passion elsewhere and you have arrived at its edge. On your arms, the hair lifts, on your cheeks, tiny pricks like bees made of steam, and the linen at your mouth feels suddenly insufficient, like an apology in a language you never learned. Someone screams, "Fire!" and someone else shouts, "Water!" and you file both under useless. The only element that matters now is weight, the weight of ash on roofs, on lungs, on choices. You do not know this word pyroclastic, and you will never learn it. But your skin has begun to study it anyway. In preparation for an exam, it will not pass. The mistress, to her credit or discredit, stops insisting on the litter and begins to walk, because her jewellery has imported too much ash. You stuff the gods into her hands, because if she is going to carry anything, it might as well be responsibility. The master drops his strongbox once and nearly drops it twice. The steward tries to help and then pretends he meant to. You keep a hand on the boy's shoulder because he has become the only compass that points forward in a city where every street now points to the same lesson. Past the gate, the press thins marginally. The slope widens into a long smear of white dotted with people who have already discovered how far their courage weighed when weighed against ash. Some sit, chests heaving, faces lifted into a sky that does not negotiate. Some claw forward on all fours, solving for stability in a problem designed to deny it. One old man walks perfectly upright, perfectly calm, hands folded as if late for a temple he will not reach, ash streaming from his eyebrows like ice, the dignity of routine insisting on another 10 paces. Far below, the sea glows faintly with reflected hell, waves confused, occasionally surging strangely inland then sucking back, the shore suddenly littered with boaters who decided to turn their oars into wings and found out they still had oars. A line of small craft rocks, indecisive, some daring the shallows, some retreating, some capsizing under cargo they were never meant to carry. Statues, strongboxes, parents, gods. Behind you the city is a map being erased. The amphitheatre's rim collapsing in segments, the temple gable slipping like a bad memory. a line of cypresses bowing together as if finally agreeing on something. You have the absurd thought that you were supposed to scrub the atrium before bed. You laugh and cough because ash punishes even jokes now. A man staggers by with a cage of birds who are sensible enough to be dead already. He clutches them as if they will resurrect first and testify. And then the tempo changes. The patter of lapilli becomes a hiss, the hiss becomes a sheet, the sheet becomes a curtain that eats distance, eats edges, eats the notion that seeing is a right. You are inside the breath of the mountain, and it has decided breathing is something it will do for both of you. The heat rises again, not the wave that sears, but the wave that warns. Your skin prickles, your chest tightens, your body, cleverer than your mind, begins to look for holes in air. You wet the linen again, though the impluvium is a memory and the sea is too far, and what little water remains tastes like amphora and fear. The master stops arguing and starts listening, because panic, too, learns. He grips your arm and says something you have never heard him say, with his eyes open. Help! And because mercy is a habit you never manage to break, even with a whip, you nod, and together you steer his wife, his child, his household gods and your borrowed spine down toward whatever the shore will decide to be. The boy stumbles, you lift, the mistress sobs, you push, the steward vanishes. You do not look. Somewhere to your right a shout rises about a boat. Pliny! Pliny! As if a name could outpace heat, the shout turns into a chorus and then a cough and then into the ordinary silence of ash. You are not going to Stabiae, you are going to the next breath. The villas on the outskirts loom like ships aground, chimneys coughing, walls cracking, their gardens buried under an obedience of white. In one doorway, a woman stands, both arms loaded with amphorae, undecided between water and wine. You want to tell her both will be ash. The slope eases at last, and for a moment you achieve something like a path, packed by the feet of others into a ribbon that promises speed. A mule carcass lies across it, and like an argument. Two men heave it aside without discussion. You hitch the mistress's arm higher because her legs are learning ash wrong. The gods knock together in her hands like dice. The boy says a prayer to a mother who is not here, and you say one to a father you barely remember, and the mountain continues its own relentless liturgy, indifferent to both. Night, which arrived at noon, now begins to deepen from black to an even blacker black you did not know existed. Torches fail because ash eats flame as angrily as it eats lungs. The world reduces to touch. The press of linen at your mouth, the grip on a shoulder, the tremor of ground through soles, the weight of small gods in someone else's arms. Words shrink to instructions. Here. Up. Wait. Now. You understand at last that language is a luxury of safety. You do not reach the sea before this block ends, because honesty requires you to admit that most of this night is repetition. Lift, cough, step, gasp, decide, lift again. Somewhere, a roof implodes with a soft whomp, like a giant clapping once. Somewhere, a man laughs for no reason at all because terror must exit somewhere. Somewhere, a dog finds you again and then loses you because the ash has decided noses are cheats. You keep moving with a conviction that surprises you, the conviction that movement itself is a kind of prayer even atheists are allowed. When at last the ground flattens and the air seems fractionally less solid, you realize you have entered the uncertain buffer where shore meets city and where choices multiply stupidly. Shelter in a half-collapsed boathouse, follow a whisper toward a skiff, join a knot of neighbors crouched against a wall that leans more than you trust walls to lean, turn back toward someone you left behind, go on, because going on has become the only rule you know. The mistress says your name, not boy, not you, and for a second, the ash tastes less of metal. You say, here, and you mean it. Behind, the mountain inhales again. You feel it rather than hear it, a change in pressure, like a god drawing breath before delivering either a blessing or the other thing. You do not look because looking is not oxygen. You place one foot where it seems least stupid. You find the boy's shoulder again. You say, here again to no one and to everyone. You keep moving. Somewhere out on the water, a lamp bobs and either approaches or doesn't. Somewhere at your back, a roof learns the wrong geometry. Somewhere above, lightning writes its illegible alphabet through the throat of the ash column. And here, now, your chest counts. 1, 2, 3. And you help the master take a step he does not deserve, and the mistress clutch gods that are too light, and the boy who has become your compass find the next firm patch of world. It is not safety, it is only next. You accept the bargain. Night has begun to teach you what it will finish in dawn. That catastrophe does not arrive as a single blow, so much as a long argument in which the mountain keeps talking, and you keep choosing verbs. You choose carry. You choose breathe thee. You choose again. You choose until choosing is taken from you, but not yet. Not on this step. Not while the shore still suggests the idea of boats and the air, insulted but available, still comes when demanded. You do not know if there is room for you on any skiff. You do not know if the sea itself has decided to be a road or a wall. You do not know whether the gods you wrapped in cloth prefer to burn or drown. You know only the next step, and because you are a servant, and that is what you have always known, you take it. And when the ash finally settles, it keeps its own kind of records. Frozen faces, curled hands, the shape of a city paused forever mid-gesture. No names, no ranks, no prayers, only outlines in stone dust. You were a servant, a shadow, a body carrying other people's burdens, and the mountain made you equal at last, writing you into history not with words, but with silence.